The morning sun cast long shadows across the palace grounds as Kate Middleton stood by the tall windows of their private quarters. Her fingers traced the cold glass while she watched the guards change their positions below. Everything looked normal from the outside, but inside these walls nothing felt the same anymore. The silence between her and William had grown so thick over the past few months that even their children noticed it during family dinners. William sat at his desk in the corner of the room, reading through official papers that seemed to demand his attention more than his own wife did these days. The sound of papers rustling was the only conversation they had shared that morning. Kate remembered when they used to wake up talking about their dreams, planning their day together, sharing quiet jokes that made them both laugh until their sides hurt. Those days felt like they belonged to different people now. The pressure of royal duties had slowly crept into every corner of their marriage like water seeping through cracks in a wall. Public appearances required them to smile and hold hands, to look like the perfect royal couple that millions of people around the world admired and looked up to. But behind closed doors they had become strangers living in the same beautiful prison. Every public event felt like acting in a play where they had forgotten their real lines. Kate turned away from the window and looked at William, hoping he might glance up and see the sadness in her eyes. But his focus remained on the documents spread across his mahogany desk. She wanted to walk over and touch his shoulder, to remind him that she was still there, still the same woman he had fallen in love with at university. Instead, she picked up her own schedule for the day and tried to push down the growing emptiness in her chest. Their children would be waking up soon, and both parents knew they had to put on their happy faces once again. George, Charlotte, and Louis deserved to see their parents as loving partners, not as two people who had somehow lost their way back to each other. The breakfast table would be filled with chatter about school projects and weekend plans, and William and Kate would smile and nod and ask all the right questions while carefully avoiding each other's eyes. Later that morning, as Kate helped Charlotte choose her outfit for school, her daughter asked a question that hit her like a punch to the stomach. "Mummy, why don't you and Daddy laugh together anymore like Uncle Harry and Aunt Megan used to?" Charlotte's innocent blue eyes searched her mother's face for an answer that Kate simply didn't have. How could she explain to a 7-year-old that sometimes love gets buried under responsibility and duty, and the weight of expectations that feel too heavy to carry? Kate knelt down to Charlotte's level and brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "Sometimes grown-ups get very busy with work, sweetheart," she said softly, hating herself for the half-truth. "But Daddy and I love you and your brothers more than anything in the whole world." Charlotte seemed satisfied with this answer and skipped away to find her school bag. But Kate remained kneeling on the bedroom floor long after her daughter had left, feeling the tears she had been holding back for weeks finally begin to fall. The rest of the day passed in a blur of royal engagements and public smiles. Kate attended a charity luncheon, where she spoke about the importance of family bonds and supporting relationships through difficult times. The irony was not lost on her as she delivered her speech to a room full of nodding heads and appreciative applause. She wondered if anyone in the audience could see through her carefully practiced composure to the woman inside who was slowly breaking apart. William spent his day at a series of meetings about environmental conservation, a cause that had always been close to his heart. But even surrounded by passionate activists and innovative scientists, he felt disconnected from everything around him. His mind kept drifting back to Kate standing by the window that morning, and the way her shoulders had seemed to carry the weight of the world. He knew he should have said something, should have crossed the room and taken her in his arms. But the gap between them felt impossible to bridge with simple gestures anymore. That evening they attended a state dinner together, walking into the grand ballroom arm in arm as cameras flashed and guests smiled in their direction. To everyone watching, they looked like the picture-perfect royal couple they had always been. Kate wore a stunning blue gown that complemented William's formal military uniform, and they moved through the evening like dancers who had performed the same routine 1,000 times before. They made polite conversation with diplomats and dignitaries, shared the occasional laugh at appropriate moments, and maintained just the right amount of physical closeness to satisfy the photographers. But as the evening wore on, Kate found herself watching other couples in the room. She noticed how some pairs would lean in close to whisper private jokes, how others would catch each other's eyes across crowded conversations and share secret smiles. She remembered when she and William used to communicate like that, when a single glance could convey entire conversations between them. Now, even standing side by side, they felt like they were on opposite sides of an ocean. The ride home in their official car was quiet, except for the gentle hum of the engine and the occasional crackle of the driver's radio. Kate stared out at the London streets passing by, watching late-night pedestrians hurrying home to their own lives and relationships. She wondered how many of those people took for granted the simple pleasure of having someone to talk to at the end of a long day. Someone who truly wanted to hear about their thoughts and feelings and dreams. When they finally arrived back at the palace, both William and Kate went through their evening routines in careful silence. They checked on their sleeping children, each taking a moment to watch George, Charlotte, and Louis breathing peacefully in their beds. In those quiet moments, standing in their children's doorways, they both felt the same overwhelming love and the same desperate fear that their marriage problems might somehow damage these three innocent souls who depended on them for everything. 3 weeks later, the situation had grown even more difficult to bear. Kate found herself spending more time in the palace gardens, walking the same paths her late mother-in-law Diana had once walked when she needed space to think. The roses were in full bloom, their sweet fragrance filling the air, but even their beauty couldn't lift the heaviness that had settled over her heart like a dark cloud that refused to move. She remembered the early days of their relationship when William would surprise her with handwritten notes tucked into her textbooks at university. He used to leave little drawings of hearts and inside jokes that made her laugh out loud in the library, earning disapproving looks from other students. Now their only written communication consisted of shared calendars and official schedules, managed by their respective private secretaries. William, meanwhile, had thrown himself into his royal duties with an intensity that worried even his closest advisors. He accepted every engagement offered to him, traveled to remote locations for conservation work, and stayed late in his office reviewing documents that could easily wait until the next day. His father, King Charles, had noticed the change in his son's behavior during their weekly private meetings and had gently asked if everything was well at home. William's response had been a tight smile and a quick change of subject to discuss upcoming state visits. The breaking point came during a family photo session for Charlotte's birthday. The royal photographer had arranged them in the palace's blue drawing room, with natural light streaming through the tall windows. George stood behind his parents' chair. Charlotte sat on Kate's lap and little Louis leaned against William's knee. To capture the perfect shot, the photographer asked William and Kate to look at each other and smile, the way they always had in previous family portraits. But when they turned to face each other, something had changed. The easy, natural connection that had always existed between them was simply gone. They looked into each other's eyes and saw strangers wearing familiar faces. The photographer, sensing the tension, suggested they take a short break and try again in a few minutes. The children ran off to play in the adjacent room, leaving William and Kate alone with the uncomfortable silence that had become their constant companion. "We can't keep pretending everything is fine," Kate said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. It was the first time either of them had spoken directly about the growing distance between them. William looked out the window at the London skyline, his hands clasped behind his back in the formal posture he had been taught since childhood. "The children need stability," he replied without turning around. "The country needs to see us as united. We have responsibilities that go beyond our personal feelings." His words were technically true, but they landed between them like stones dropped into still water, creating ripples of hurt that spread outward in all directions. Kate stood up from the ornate chair where she had been sitting and walked to the opposite side of the room. "I understand our duties, William. I've never forgotten them for a single day since we got married. But what about us? What about the people we used to be when we were just William and Kate before all of this?" She gestured around the elegant room with its priceless artwork and centuries of royal history, weighing down every surface. "Those people don't exist anymore," William said, finally turning to look at her. "They haven't existed for years. We knew this would happen when we chose this life. We knew the crown would change everything." His voice was steady and controlled, but Kate could see the pain in his eyes that he was trying so hard to hide from everyone, including himself. The photographer returned with the children, who bounded into the room full of energy and excitement about having their pictures taken. George immediately noticed the tension between his parents and asked if they were having an argument. Both William and Kate quickly reassured him that everything was fine, falling back into the protective roles they had perfected over the years. The photo session continued, and they managed to capture several beautiful images of their family. But Kate knew that anyone who looked closely at those pictures would be able to see the sadness hiding behind their practiced smiles. That evening, after the children were asleep, Kate made a decision that had been building in her heart for weeks. She knocked softly on the door of William's private study, where he was working late as usual. When he looked up from his papers, she could see the exhaustion in his eyes that went far deeper than just physical tiredness. "I've been thinking about taking some time away," she said, standing in the doorway because crossing the threshold into his private space felt too intimate now. "Maybe visiting my parents for a few weeks or taking the children to see my sister Pippa. We all need some space to figure out what comes next." William set down his pen and leaned back in his leather chair. For a moment, he looked like the young man she had fallen in love with all those years ago, vulnerable and uncertain instead of the controlled royal figure he had become. "Is that what you really want?" he asked, and she could hear the unspoken question underneath his words. "Are you leaving me?" "I don't know what I want anymore," Kate admitted, and the honesty of her answer surprised them both. "I know what I should want, what everyone expects me to want. But I can't remember the last time I felt truly happy, William. Can you?" The question hung in the air between them like a challenge neither of them was ready to answer. They talked for another hour that night, the longest conversation they had shared in months. They discussed practical arrangements for her temporary departure, how to explain it to the children, what to tell the press office about her reduced schedule. But they carefully avoided talking about the deeper questions that really mattered. Whether their marriage could be saved, whether they still loved each other underneath all the duty and protocol, whether there was any way back to the people they used to be. As Kate finally said goodnight and turned to leave his study, William called her name softly. When she turned back, he looked like he wanted to say something important, something that might change everything between them. But after a long moment, he simply said, "I hope you find what you're looking for." She nodded and closed the door quietly behind her, both of them knowing that their silent goodbye had already begun. The announcement came on a quiet Tuesday morning through a carefully worded press release from Kensington Palace. "The Duchess of Cambridge will be taking a brief private retreat to focus on family time and personal reflection. Her Royal Highness looks forward to resuming her full schedule of royal engagements in the coming weeks." The statement was designed to sound routine, but royal reporters immediately sensed there was more to the story than the palace was revealing. Kate packed her bags with the same careful attention she gave to everything else in her royal life. Each item was chosen thoughtfully, from comfortable clothes for long walks in the countryside to the family photos she couldn't bear to leave behind. As she folded her clothes into the suitcase, she found the small jewelry box that contained her engagement ring from William. She had worn it every day for over a decade, but now she slipped it off her finger and placed it gently inside the box, unsure when or if she would put it on again. The children were told that Mummy needed some quiet time to rest and would be staying with Grandma and Grandpa Middleton for a while. George, being the oldest, asked more questions than his younger siblings, but Kate managed to reassure all three that this had nothing to do with them and everything to do with grown-up feelings that were sometimes hard to understand. Charlotte cried when she realized she wouldn't see her mother every day, and Kate had to step out of the room to compose herself before coming back to comfort her daughter. William maintained his regular schedule as if nothing had changed, but those closest to him noticed the subtle differences in his behavior. He spoke less during meetings, spent longer hours in his office, and seemed to carry himself with an even more formal posture than usual. When asked about Kate's absence during a public engagement, he gave the same carefully prepared response every time. "The Duchess is taking some well-deserved time with her family, and I fully support her decision." At her parents' house in Berkshire, Kate found herself reliving memories from her childhood and early adult years. She walked through the same fields where she had played as a little girl, sat in the same kitchen where she had told her mother about meeting a handsome prince at university, and slept in her old bedroom that still held traces of the person she had been. Before royal life changed everything about her world, her mother, Carol, was careful not to ask too many direct questions, but she could see the pain in her daughter's eyes. Instead, she simply made sure Kate had space when she needed it and company when she wanted it. They spent long afternoons gardening together, their hands working in the soil while they talked about everything except the obvious reason for Kate's visit. Sometimes the best conversations happen when you're both focused on something else, and slowly, Kate began to remember who she had been before she became a duchess. The media attention was intense but respectful, with photographers keeping their distance from the Middleton family home. Still, Kate felt like she was living in a fishbowl, unable to go anywhere without wondering if someone was watching and taking pictures. She realized that even in her personal crisis, she couldn't escape the public nature of her life. Privacy was a luxury she had given up the day she said yes to William's proposal, and there was no going back to being a regular person dealing with marriage problems in a regular way. Meanwhile, back at the palace, William was struggling with his own demons. Without Kate there to share the daily challenges of royal life, he felt more isolated than ever. He had grown so accustomed to having her by his side at events that he found himself unconsciously looking for her during public appearances, only to remember that she wasn't there. The children asked about her constantly, and each question felt like a small knife in his heart. One evening, while reading bedtime stories to Louis, his youngest son asked when Mummy was coming home. William realized he didn't have an honest answer to give. He had been so focused on maintaining appearances and fulfilling his royal duties that he hadn't actually dealt with the real problems in his marriage. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to think about what his life would look like if Kate decided not to come back at all. The thought terrified him more than he expected. Somewhere underneath all the protocol and public expectations, he discovered that he still loved his wife deeply. The problem wasn't that their feelings for each other had died. It was that they had buried those feelings under so many layers of duty and formality that they had forgotten how to reach them. They had become so good at being the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge that they had stopped being William and Kate. During her second week away, Kate received an unexpected visitor. Harry arrived at her parents' house unannounced, looking older and more serious than she remembered from their last meeting. As William's younger brother, he had watched their marriage struggles from a distance, but he had also experienced his own challenges with royal life and understood the pressure in a way that few others could. "I'm not here to take sides or give advice," Harry said as they walked through the garden together. "I just wanted you to know that I understand how hard this is. The institution has a way of swallowing people whole if you're not careful. Meghan and I learned that the hard way." He didn't need to say more. Kate knew he was referring to the difficult circumstances that had led to his own departure from royal duties. They talked for hours about the impossible balance between personal happiness and public duty, about the weight of expectations and the cost of living your entire life in the spotlight. Harry shared stories about his own struggles with royal life, and Kate found herself crying for the first time since she had left the palace. Not tears of sadness, but tears of relief at finally being able to talk honestly with someone who truly understood what she was going through. "The question isn't whether you love William," Harry said as the sun began to set over the Middleton garden. "The question is whether the two of you can find a way to love each other within the life you've chosen. Some people can make it work and others can't. There's no shame in either choice, but you have to be honest about which one you are." That night, Kate lay awake thinking about Harry's words. She realized that she had been so focused on whether her marriage was broken that she hadn't considered whether it might be possible to build something new and different in its place. Maybe the William and Kate who had fallen in love at university were gone forever, but perhaps there was room for new versions of themselves to emerge. The question was whether both of them were willing to do the hard work of figuring out who those new people might be. After 3 weeks away, Kate made the decision to return to London, but not to resume life exactly as it had been before. She had spent countless hours walking through the countryside near her childhood home, thinking about what she truly wanted from her life and her marriage. The woman who drove back through the palace gates was different from the one who had left. She carried herself with a new kind of strength, born from facing her fears and uncertainties head-on rather than hiding from them behind royal protocol. William was in his study when she arrived, and for a moment neither of them knew quite what to say. 3 weeks apart had felt like 3 years, and they were both nervous about seeing each other again. Kate still wasn't wearing her wedding ring, and William noticed its absence immediately, though he didn't comment on it. Instead, they talked about practical things first: the children's schedules, upcoming royal engagements, and the various matters that had accumulated during her absence. "I've done a lot of thinking," Kate said finally. settling into the chair across from his desk. About us, about this life we've built, about what I want for our children and for myself. William set down his pen and gave her his full attention for the first time in months, sensing that this conversation would be different from all the careful, polite exchanges they had shared recently. I realized something while I was away, Kate continued, her voice steady but soft. We've been so afraid of failing as royals that we forgot how to succeed as human beings. We turned our marriage into another duty to perform rather than a relationship to nurture. And somewhere along the way, we lost each other completely. William nodded slowly, recognizing the truth in her words even though hearing them spoken aloud was painful. I know, he said quietly. I've been thinking about the same things. I keep wondering when we stopped talking about our dreams and started only discussing our obligations. When did we become so formal with each other that we can't even have a proper argument anymore? They spent the next several hours talking more honestly than they had in years. Kate told him about her conversations with Harry, about the fears she had been carrying about losing herself entirely in royal life, about how desperately she wanted their children to grow up seeing their parents as partners, who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. William shared his own struggles with the pressure of his position, his fear of disappointing his father and the country, and how isolated he had felt even within their own marriage. I don't want to go back to the way things were, Kate said as the afternoon light began to fade outside his study windows. If we're going to make this work, we need to create something completely new. New rules, new ways of relating to each other, new boundaries with the institution that has been consuming our lives. William was quiet for a long moment, processing what she was suggesting. What would that look like? He asked, and Kate could hear both hope and skepticism in his voice. They had been trapped in their patterns for so long that imagining a different way of living felt almost impossible. I don't know exactly, Kate admitted, but I think we start by remembering that we're William and Kate first and the Duke and Duchess second. We start by protecting our private time together, and with the children as fiercely as we protect our public duties. We start by talking to each other like the friends we used to be instead of like business partners managing a royal schedule. Over the following days, they began implementing small changes that felt revolutionary in the context of their carefully structured royal lives. They instituted a rule that work phones stayed outside their bedroom, and that they would have at least one meal together each day, without discussing any official business. They started taking evening walks around the palace grounds together, just the two of them, talking about books they were reading, memories from their university days, or silly observations about people they had met at recent events. The children noticed the change immediately. George commented that his parents seemed happier, and Charlotte asked if they were going to start laughing together again like they used to. Louis, too young to understand the complexities of adult relationships, simply enjoyed having both his parents more present and engaged during family time. The four of them started having regular movie nights and weekend adventures that had nothing to do with royal duties. Kate slowly began wearing her wedding ring again, but the gesture felt different now. Instead of a symbol of duty and obligation, it became a choice she made each morning to commit to the hard work of rebuilding their relationship. William noticed when it reappeared on her finger, and the small smile he gave her across the breakfast table spoke volumes about his own renewed commitment to their marriage. Their first public appearance together after Kate's return was at a children's hospital in Manchester. Royal observers and media commentators analyzed every interaction between them, looking for signs of trouble or reconciliation. But William and Kate had learned something important during their time apart. Their marriage belonged to them, not to the public, and they could protect it even while living their lives in the spotlight. The visit went well, with both of them genuinely engaged with the children and families they met. During a quiet moment between official activities, Kate reached for William's hand as they walked down a hospital corridor. It was a simple gesture, but it felt monumental to both of them. They were choosing each other again, not because royal protocol demanded it, but because they wanted to. That evening, as they drove back to London together, they talked about the families they had met at the hospital. They discussed how inspiring it was to see parents supporting each other through unimaginable challenges, and how it put their own problems into perspective. Their marriage difficulties hadn't disappeared, but they were beginning to feel manageable, rather than insurmountable. "Thank you," William said as their car approached the palace. Kate looked at him questioningly and he continued, "For not giving up on us. For being brave enough to leave when you needed to. And brave enough to come back and try again. I know this isn't easy." Kate squeezed his hand, a gesture that would have felt forced and artificial just a month earlier, but now felt natural and right. "We're not the same people we were when we got married," she said. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe we can learn to love who we're becoming instead of mourning who we used to be." As they walked into the palace together, both William and Kate felt something they hadn't experienced in months: hope. They knew they still had a long way to go, but for the first time in a very long time, they believed their marriage might actually survive the weight of the crown they were destined to wear together. 6 months had passed since Kate's temporary departure, and their marriage had found a new rhythm that felt both different and better than what they had before. They had learned to steal moments of genuine connection throughout their busy days, turning car rides between engagements into opportunities for real conversation and finding ways to support each other during the most challenging aspects of royal life. But their progress was tested when they received news that would shake the very foundation of their carefully rebuilt relationship. King Charles had suffered a serious health scare, and the doctors were recommending that he step back from many of his royal duties. This meant that William would need to take on significantly more responsibilities, potentially including the roles and ceremonies that would essentially make him the acting monarch in all but name. The conversation with his father took place in the king's private study at Buckingham Palace, with Kate present at Charles's request. The older man looked frail in a way that reminded both William and Kate that their time as simply the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge was coming to an end much sooner than they had expected. The weight of the crown was about to become much more real and much heavier. "I need to know that the two of you are strong enough to handle what's coming," Charles said, his voice weaker than usual but still carrying the authority of decades of royal service. "The country will be watching more closely than ever, and there can't be any doubt about your unity and commitment. Can you give me that assurance?" William and Kate exchanged a look that spoke volumes about how far they had come in the past 6 months. "Yes, sir," William replied formally, but then he reached for Kate's hand in a gesture that was both personal and significant. "We're ready to serve together, whatever that requires." The transition period began immediately, with William taking on new ceremonial duties and Kate stepping into more prominent roles within the royal family hierarchy. The increased scrutiny was intense, with every public appearance analyzed for signs of how they were handling the pressure. Royal commentators debated whether they were truly ready for the responsibilities that would soon make them the future King and Queen of England. During this challenging time, Kate discovered strengths she didn't know she possessed. The quiet confidence she had developed during her time away from the palace served her well as she navigated the complex protocols and expectations of her elevated position. She found her voice in ways she never had before, speaking more boldly about causes she cared about and bringing a sense of authenticity to royal engagements that impressed both the public and seasoned palace staff. William, meanwhile, was grappling with the reality of his future role in a more immediate way than he ever had before. The abstract concept of someday becoming king had suddenly become a tangible reality with specific demands and timelines. He found himself leaning on Kate in ways that reminded them both of their university days, when they had supported each other through academic pressures and uncertain futures. One particularly difficult day came when they had to attend a state funeral for a foreign dignitary, representing the king who was too unwell to travel. As they stood together during the solemn ceremony, Kate noticed that William's hands were shaking slightly. Without thinking, she moved closer to him, offering her steady presence as an anchor during a moment when the weight of his future responsibilities felt overwhelming. After the ceremony, they found a quiet moment in their hotel room before the official reception. William sat on the edge of the bed, his formal military uniform suddenly feeling like a costume that was too big for him. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm strong enough for all of this," he said, a vulnerability in his voice that Kate hadn't heard since they were much younger. "You don't have to be strong all the time," Kate replied, sitting beside him. "That's what partners are for. We can take turns being strong for each other." It was a simple statement, but it captured something essential about what their marriage had become during their rebuilding process. They had learned to be a team again, not just in public, but in the private moments when they were most afraid and uncertain. Their children were also adjusting to the changes in their parents' roles and responsibilities. George, as the eldest, was beginning to understand more about his own future position and what it would mean for his life. Charlotte asked increasingly sophisticated questions about why Grandpa Charles was sick and what would happen if Daddy became king. Louis, still young enough to be mostly unaware of the larger implications, simply enjoyed having his parents more present and attentive despite their increased duties. The family started having regular conversations about their changing circumstances, with William and Kate working hard to maintain as much normalcy as possible while preparing their children for the realities of their royal destiny. They established new traditions like weekly family meetings where everyone could share their thoughts and concerns about upcoming events or changes in their routine. During this period, Kate also began working with a private counselor who specialized in helping people navigate major life transitions. The sessions helped her process her feelings about taking on more public responsibilities while maintaining her sense of personal identity. She learned techniques for managing anxiety and stress that proved invaluable during high-pressure public events. William was initially resistant to the idea of counseling, viewing it as potentially compromising from a security perspective and unnecessary given his royal training. But after seeing how much it helped Kate, he agreed to joint sessions where they could work on communication skills and strategies for supporting each other through the challenges ahead. One breakthrough moment came during a session where they were asked to describe their fears about their future roles. Kate admitted that she was terrified of losing herself completely in the institution of the monarchy, while William confessed that he was afraid of becoming as isolated and burdened as he had seen his father become over the years. The counselor helped them see that these fears were not only normal, but could actually serve as guideposts for creating boundaries and maintaining their connection to each other. As the months passed, their public appearances took on a new quality that royal observers began to notice and comment on. There was an ease between them that seemed authentic rather than performed, a genuine partnership that extended beyond their formal roles. They had learned to find moments of connection even during the most formal ceremonies, sharing brief smiles or supportive glances that spoke to their renewed bond. The test of their strengthened relationship came during their first major solo international tour since Kate's return. They traveled to Australia and New Zealand for 2 weeks, representing the king at various state functions and engaging in the kind of intensive public schedule that had previously left them both exhausted and disconnected from each other. But this time was different. They had developed strategies for maintaining their connection even during the most demanding days, and they protected their private time together with the same intensity they brought to their public duties. Each evening, after completing their official obligations, they would spend time debriefing about the day, sharing their observations and supporting each other through any difficult moments. The turning point came during their final day in New Zealand, at a small coastal town where they were visiting a community center that supported families in crisis. As they listened to stories from local residents about overcoming challenges and supporting each other through difficult times, Kate felt something shift inside her heart. She looked at William, who was genuinely engaged with a young father talking about rebuilding his life after job loss, and realized that they had truly found their way back to each other. That evening, as they walked along the beach near their hotel, Kate stopped and turned to face William. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, and for the first time in years, she felt completely present in the moment with her husband. "Do you remember what you said to me the night before our wedding?" she asked, taking his hands in hers. William smiled, the first truly relaxed expression she had seen on his face in months. "I told you that no matter what happened, no matter how crazy our lives became, I would always try to find my way back to you." He paused, looking into her eyes with the same intensity he had shown as a nervous bridegroom more than a decade earlier. "I'm sorry it took me so long to remember that promise. We both forgot for a while," Kate replied softly. "But we found our way back. That's what matters now." They stood together on that beach for nearly an hour, talking about their hopes for the future, their dreams for their children, and their commitment to protecting the love they had worked so hard to rebuild. When they returned to London, they made a decision that surprised everyone, including themselves. They requested a private meeting with King Charles to discuss restructuring their royal duties in a way that would allow them to maintain stronger boundaries between their public and private lives. It was an unprecedented conversation, but Charles had watched his son's marriage nearly collapse and understood the importance of what they were proposing. Your mother and I never figured out how to protect our relationship from the demands of royal life, Charles told them during that meeting. If you found a way to do that, then you have my full support in implementing whatever changes you need to make. The king's blessing gave them the freedom to create a new model for how senior royals could serve their country while maintaining healthy marriages and family lives. They established new protocols that seemed small from the outside but were revolutionary for their relationship. They limited the number of evening engagements they would accept, ensuring that they could have dinner together as a family at least 4 nights a week. They insisted on having at least 1 weekend per month completely free from official duties, time they could spend with their children or simply enjoying each other's company without any royal obligations. Most importantly, they created a code word they could use during public events when one of them was feeling overwhelmed or needed support from the other. It was a small thing, but it gave them a way to take care of each other even in the most formal and scrutinized situations. The media never caught on to their system, but those closest to them noticed how they seemed to anticipate each other's needs and provide support in subtle but meaningful ways. Their children thrived in this new environment where their parents were more present and genuinely happy together. George became more confident in social situations. Charlotte developed a wonderful sense of humor that reminded everyone of her father, and Louis grew into a curious and affectionate little boy who loved having his whole family together for their weekly movie nights. The real test of their renewed partnership came when King Charles made the formal announcement that he would be stepping back from most of his royal duties due to his health concerns. William and Kate would essentially become the working head of the royal family, taking on responsibilities that would prepare them for their eventual roles as king and queen. The announcement sent shockwaves through the media and the public, but William and Kate faced the news with a calm confidence that impressed everyone around them. During their first joint television interview since the announcement, they were asked about how they planned to balance their increased responsibilities with their family life. Kate's answer surprised many viewers with its directness and authenticity. "We've learned that our marriage and our family have to come first," she said, looking directly at William as she spoke. "If we're not strong together, we can't serve our country effectively. That's not just true for us personally. It's true for the monarchy as an institution." William nodded, adding, "We've discovered that being honest about our struggles and working together to overcome them has made us better partners and better parents. We hope it will also make us better servants of the British people." Their honesty about the challenges they had faced and overcome resonated deeply with the public, who saw them as a modern royal couple dealing with real problems in authentic ways. Behind the scenes, they continued to work with their counselor, using their sessions to navigate the complex emotions and pressures that came with their elevated status. They had learned to communicate more effectively about their fears and concerns, and they had developed strategies for supporting each other through the inevitable difficulties that lay ahead. One evening, as they were reviewing their schedules for the following month, Kate noticed that they had been assigned to separate engagements on their wedding anniversary. In the past, she would have simply accepted the schedule and felt resentful about the missed opportunity to celebrate together. But now she spoke up immediately. "We need to change this," she said, pointing to the conflicting appointments. "Our anniversary is important to us, and we're not going to let it get lost in royal duties." William agreed without hesitation, and they worked with their private secretaries to rearrange the schedule so they could spend that day together with their children. It was a small victory, but it represented something much larger. They had learned to advocate for their relationship and their family within the structure of royal life. They had found a way to serve their country without sacrificing their marriage, and they had created a model that could guide them through whatever challenges lay ahead. As they prepared for sleep that night, Kate reflected on how different she felt from the woman who had packed her bags and left the palace more than a year earlier. She had found her strength, her voice, and her partnership with William. Most importantly, she had learned that love wasn't just a feeling but a choice that had to be made every day, especially when life became complicated and demanding. 2 years after their crisis had brought them to the brink of separation, William and Kate stood together in Westminster Abbey for a service commemorating King Charles's 50 years of public service. The ceremony was both a celebration of his contributions to the country, and a symbolic passing of responsibility to the next generation. As they walked down the ancient aisle together, their children following behind them, millions of people around the world watched what many considered the future of the British monarchy. But for William and Kate, the moment was deeply personal. They had traveled a difficult journey to reach this point, and they both understood how close they had come to losing everything that mattered most to them. As they took their seats in the front row, Kate's hand found William's, and they shared a look that spoke volumes about the strength they had built together through adversity. The Archbishop's sermon focused on service, sacrifice, and the importance of supporting one another through life's challenges. As the words echoed through the historic cathedral, Kate thought about how different her understanding of those concepts had become over the past 2 years. She had learned that true service required not just dedication to duty, but also the wisdom to protect the relationships that made that service meaningful and sustainable. After the ceremony, they attended a reception at Buckingham Palace where they mingled with heads of state, diplomats, and other members of the royal family. Throughout the evening, Kate noticed how naturally she and William worked together, moving through conversations and social obligations as true partners. They had developed an intuitive understanding of each other's strengths and preferences, allowing them to support each other seamlessly during public events. During a quiet moment on the palace balcony, away from the crowds inside, William turned to Kate with a serious expression. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't been brave enough to leave that day?" he asked, referring to her temporary departure that had ultimately saved their marriage. Kate considered the question carefully. "I think we would have continued drifting apart until we became complete strangers living in the same house," she said honestly. "We would have fulfilled our royal duties perfectly, but we would have lost ourselves and each other in the process. Our children would have grown up seeing a relationship that was all performance and no genuine connection. I was so angry when you left," William admitted. "Not at you, but at myself for letting things get so bad that you felt you had no other choice. I realized I had been hiding behind royal protocol because it was easier than dealing with our real problems." He paused, looking out over the palace gardens where they had taken so many walks during their healing process. "Thank you for forcing us to confront the truth about what we were becoming." As the evening wound down, they said their goodbyes to the various dignitaries and family members, then made their way back to their private quarters, where their children were waiting with their nannies. George, Charlotte, and Louis had stayed, up past their usual bedtime to hear about the ceremony, and they peppered their parents with questions about the service and the important people they had met. While helping Charlotte get ready for bed, Kate was struck by how naturally confident and happy her daughter seemed. Charlotte asked thoughtful questions about royal traditions and talked excitedly about a school project she was working on about family history. Kate realized that her children were growing up with parents who genuinely enjoyed each other's company, and she felt grateful for the example she and William were now able to provide. Later that night, as they prepared for sleep, William brought up a conversation they had been having intermittently about their long-term plans. With King Charles's health continuing to be a concern, it was becoming increasingly likely that William would need to take on the full responsibilities of kingship sooner than originally expected. The prospect was both exciting and daunting, but they faced it together with a confidence that would have been impossible during their darkest period. "Whatever happens, we'll handle it together," Kate said, echoing words that had become something of a motto for them over the past 2 years. "We've proven to ourselves that we can work through anything as long as we're honest with each other and committed to protecting our relationship." William nodded, pulling her closer to him. "I used to think that being king meant sacrificing everything personal for the sake of duty," he said. "But I've learned that the opposite is true. Having a strong marriage and a happy family makes me a better leader and a better servant to the country. Our people deserve rulers who understand the value of love and partnership, not just duty and obligation." They talked late into the night about their hopes for the future, their plans for raising their children to understand both the privileges and responsibilities of their positions, and their commitment to continuing the work of building a modern monarchy that could serve the country while preserving the humanity of those who wore the crown. As Kate finally drifted off to sleep, she reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The silent goodbye she had feared during their darkest days had never actually happened. Instead, they had found a way to say hello again, to the people they had been and the people they were becoming. Their love story hadn't ended with a dramatic separation or a fairy tale rescue. It had evolved into something deeper and more resilient through honest work and mutual commitment. The next morning brought news that would test their renewed partnership in ways they couldn't have anticipated. King Charles had decided to accelerate his transition plans, and William would officially become the Prince of Wales within the month, with Kate assuming the title of Princess of Wales. The announcement would be made public the following week, and they would need to prepare for an entirely new level of scrutiny and responsibility. But as they sat together over breakfast reviewing the documents that outlined their new roles and responsibilities, neither William nor Kate felt the panic or dread that such news might have caused them 2 years earlier. Instead, they felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, confident in their partnership, and committed to maintaining the strong foundation they had worked so hard to rebuild. "Are you ready for this?" William asked, looking up from the papers scattered across their breakfast table. Kate smiled, reaching for his hand across the table. "I'm ready for anything, as long as we're in it together," she replied. And for the first time in years, they both knew without any doubt that they truly were. Their silent goodbye had become a loud and joyful hello to the rest of their lives together, and millions of people around the world would witness their love story continue to unfold in the years to come. But more importantly, their children would grow up seeing what real partnership looked like, and their marriage would serve as the foundation for a modern monarchy built on love, respect, and genuine connection, rather than just duty and tradition.